Welcome! My name is Fabio Rinaldi, and in this presentation I will talk about two collaborative projects between the Vet Swiss faculty of the University of Bern and the Institute of Computational Linguistics of the University of Zurich. Because I'm also the chair of this session, questions at the end of the presentation will be answered by my colleague and co-author, Anne Goehring. You can see at the structure of my presentation, and we'll start immediately with background information. The funding for both projects was provided by the Federal Food Safety and Veterinary Office. The goal is to use text mining technologies in the analysis of pathology reports from multiple Swiss veterinary laboratories. The pathology services offered by these institutions are very important to the food production sector in Switzerland and ultimately to public health. Methods for early detection of clusters of disease are important to prevent potentially dangerous epidemics, which is an observation that of course applies not only to farm animals but also to human health, as we all have experienced recently. In the case of Switzerland, there is an abundance of data on animal health stored in national databases. However, this data is often difficult to use, in part because of different formats, but in part also due to the fact that a significant amount of information is provided in the form of free text. In the first project, we developed an automated text mining tool that was specifically tailored to the autopsy reports from the University of Bern. In the second project, we included reports from other laboratories. This required adaptation to the different types of document formats, different document structures, and in some cases also different nomenclatures and different terminological conventions. Additionally, we also considered clinical data, which means reports on the examination of live animals as opposed to autopsies of dead animals. We developed tools to extract information from these different sources, and the results are used in the project to enable identification of spatial and temporal clusters of disease. We are also developing an editing interface to assist the veterinary doctors or students in the process of writing the reports in order to ensure a more uniform usage of the reference terminology. Now, let's see which kind of data we work with. This is an example of a pathology report, or actually just a fragment of it, from the Zurich lab. Although the entire report contains also structured data, for the purpose of this project it is important to notice that text plays a very important role. Now we move to the topic of terminology identification and structuring. Technical terminology plays a key role in the interpretation of the reports. For example, terms indicating a potential disease are of major importance. In this slide you can see different terms indicating the same disease, or variants of it. Different linguistic transformations, including misspellings, can be found in the reports. It is important to be able to recognize all the different variants and be able to refer all of them to the same disease. In the project, we developed tools to map the terminology found in the reports to a reference knowledge structure. In particular, we used the UMLS, Unified Medical Language System. The UMLS is a resource maintained by the US National Library of Medicine. It aims at collecting and organizing many controlled vocabularies in the biomedical sciences. Although the majority of it is in English, there are also sections in German and other languages. All terms in the UMLS are mapped to a symbolic entity, which is represented in the figure by a green ellipse. The symbolic entity represents a concept that those terms denote. Each concept has a unique identifier, called the Concept Unique Identifier, or CUI, which you can see in the figure inside each green ellipse. We find that two different terms, like muskelnecrose and myonecrose, are mapped to the same concept in the UMLS. Then we can assume that they represent the same concept, so they are synonyms. In the second project, we additionally considered another terminological resource, a taxonomy of disease and symptoms maintained by the Association of Swiss Cattle Breeders. I will refer to this resource as the ASR taxonomy in this presentation. The ASR taxonomy provides a numeric code for each concept that it contains. This is in principle similar to the concept unique identifier of the UMLS, and you can see it indicated in Zuehlke by a sequence of 3 or 4 numbers, which refer to the position of the concept in the hierarchy. One of our goals was to attempt to map the ASR concepts into UMLS concepts. In some cases this process was straightforward, but in several cases it was quite difficult. You can see some examples in this slide. In many cases, we did not find an exact match into UMLS for the original ASR term, so we resorted to a strategy of local navigation, looking for hyponyms or hyperonyms or other related concepts. In a few cases, the relationship between concepts can be deduced only indirectly. For example, the UMLS has a relationship called as causative agent. Through this relationship, it is possible to infer a connection between the infection agent Mycoplasma bovis and the disease mastitis. You could read this picture as to mean Mycoplasma bovis is a type of mycoplasma, and Mycoplasma bacteria are known to cause mastitis. Now we look at the tools that enable the veterinary doctors to process the reports. One of the main outcomes of the project is the development of a semi-automated text mining tool. The purpose of the tool is to extract relevant information from pathology reports with minimal human intervention, and to classify pathological findings into disease categories. All the reports that are considered potentially relevant for a given study are put together in a single spreadsheet, where the first column contains the text of the reports. The spreadsheet can be submitted to an online interface, which will send it to a server running our tools, and the server then returns back the same spreadsheet with additional information provided in other columns. The additional information includes relevant terminology detected in each report and the classification in disease categories proposed by the system. We have chosen the format of a spreadsheet for interaction between the user and the system due to the fact that it is relatively simple to use and manipulate. There are also special columns where a domain expert can accept or reject classification provided by the system. The spreadsheet can then be resubmitted, which allows the system to score itself and potentially correct its own mistakes by retraining its models. In this slide, you see the page with the results of the system. The feedback provided by the human is shown in comparison with the automated classification, which enables immediate visualization of the performance of the system. Now we move to data analytics. This is the part of the project developed by our partners at the University of Bern, so we'll move relatively quickly through it. The ultimate goal of the project is to serve as the basis for epidemiological studies of animal disease. In this slide, you can see classification of a specific set of reports. For each type of animal, cattle and pig in this case, and for each age class, it shows the distribution of the major disease categories that were defined in the project. The data extracted from the reports enables different types of spatial and temporal visualizations. In this slide, you see the identification of geographical clusters of disease. In this slide, you can see temporal trends. It is easy to spot the seasonal pattern of some diseases, which is expected, but there are some outliers which might point to specific problems. The reports processed in the second project have already enabled detailed studies concerning the distribution of disease in cattle across the country. For example, the recently published paper, which is cited in this slide. Now we move to the conclusion. I have presented some of the results of an ongoing collaboration between the Vet Swiss faculty of the University of Bern and the Institute of Computational Linguistics of the University of Zurich. We have created tools that enable a domain expert to efficiently process hundreds of reports, detect relevant domain terminology, and classify them according to predefined disease categories. We have dealt with different terminological resources and partially mapped them across each other. The data generated by the project can be used to generate spatial and temporal analysis, and it enables in-depth studies pertaining to animal diseases. With this I finish, and thank you for your attention.